Thank you for staying until the end. This has been an absolutely extraordinary day, and I just wanted to first especially thank the Japan Education Foundation and USC and also Kansai University for putting on this event, and thank you to Adam and Shingo and Jonathan for your organization of the event. So Adam just asked us to say a few words in closing and our takeaway messages from the day. And I think one of the takeaway messages from hearing this extraordinary round of panels for me was both how much we have learned over the past decade and also how much we still have to learn and have to apply from these events. We just heard the mayor speak of Fukushima and said this was a disaster without precedent. And when Hurricane Katrina happened in 2005, across this nation, people said this is a catastrophe without precedent. But in the more than decades since Katrina, we have seen disaster after disaster after disaster, and one is unfolding right now in this state that we are yet again looking for another adjective to explain this historic, catastrophic level of loss. And so I'm so impressed with what I heard today, and I also think that in one of Adam's latest papers, he's putting forth an economic model for thinking about population displacement and resettlement. But today we heard perspectives from economics, sociology, anthropology, public policy, and with each new psychology, with each new perspective, we heard a different set of variables, right, that are both driving this post-disaster migration and then are also informing the resettlement patterns. And so it seems like building on this economic model, thinking about how do we bring the variables from these different disciplines together, which I think is one of your grand plans to really learn from one another and to have the most robust model of post-disaster migration and resettlement possible. A second takeaway for me today was really methodological and thinking about not just what are we learning. We heard a number of highly provocative questions today. So what are we learning? What are we asking? But also, who are we learning from? Before this event started today, I was speaking to Shoji about sort of how researchers, we may cause a third or a fourth disaster after the initial cascading disasters as we come and we ask our questions and we try to learn. And so I think we have some models that we heard today about how might we come together collectively as a research community to ask questions across these disciplinary lines so we can build larger, more robust data sets and then follow these populations over time so we can understand their resettlement experiences more deeply. So thank you very much. Oh, Shingo.
Okay. So thank you very much for the very interesting discussion. So before I start my concluding remarks, I want to introduce two persons from Naraha town. One is Mr. Igari, who is the head of the recovery office in Naraha municipality. And the second one is Mr. Endo, who is the secretary of the mayor. So we all three have been discussed about how to make his presentation. So I think I'm very happy to see that the presentation was very successful. So thank you very much for your, both of you, your contribution. So what I want to conclude was that two things come up in my mind. The first one is, so the migration should be voluntary, probably, because as we have been discussed, as Bridget has told us, that the people decided to migrate if he believes that his life is going to better off. But the forced migration is not necessarily make such an improvement. So I think that basically, based on our analytical result, the migration should be voluntary. But on the other hand, So the people's life is not independent from other decision. So basically, if people migrate, if people relocate, if other people relocated, the relocation should be the best option for him. But if they're not, this is not a good option. So it's quite dependent for other decisions. So that is a very basic source of the problem. So the other issue that the Lori has mentioned, that the people migrated from the forced migrated people from the New Orleans has moved 4.8 times average. So that is also true in case of Fukushima. They have average 5.4 probably. Yeah, it's quite the same. So it was very surprising to me. So I think that people should migrate based on their decision. However, as I told that this is quite difficult. So how to reconcile these two, the individual decision and collective decision? So that is a very, very important topic to be focused on. And the second one is time. Time is very important variable to think about these issues. So that is, the Lori has reminded me that topic because she criticized our econometric analysis because the people's mindset is likely to change depending on the time. So I think that is true. That's absolutely true. But on the other hand, we have to consider about the policy lags. Policy lags is probably most of you are aware about that. So policy has 3 lags. One is the recognition lag. So the policymaker has to recognize the issue, but it takes a little bit time to consider, to recognize. And the second one is implementation lag. So we started something, but it takes a little bit long time to finance it and legislate it. So we need some time to implement it. And the third one is effective lag. Once the good policy was implemented, it has a little bit time to make some good outcomes. So the Japanese government was, I think the Japanese government has suffered from these lags. Because, you know, for example, the decontamination took a little bit long time, so 2 or 3 years. But during that time, the people changed their mind. So some people want to go back initially, but after several years, they change their mind not to go home. So this is not the issue of the Japanese government only, but it's an inherent problem for the recovery policy. So I think there will be a big challenge to cope with these lags, especially the returning repatriation policy. So I think I want to suggest we have a new horizon of the new research, not only for the econometric analysis, but also just an interview analysis. But we have to integrate these outcomes into how we formulate a recovery policy, which is very effective and which encourages the people's welfare. So that's my conclusion. Thank you very much.
So the comment that I want to make is broadly about the value of symposiums like this. So we've brought together people from economics, from sociology, practitioners and politicians. And I think it's really important for us to take a step back and realize what we can and cannot learn from our own disciplines in these things. So never let anyone know that I said this, but economics has some weaknesses. And so I will pick on my own. So, what we see is economics, we can say a lot of very good things about the average effect or the effect on the average person, right? But it's important to think about the entire distribution. And if there's huge effects who are happening just brutally at the lowest levels, that's not going to be picked up in an economics model. And so we need to think about the full institutional structure surrounding it, right? If you have strong institutions, that go into place before the disaster, damages and migration and repatriation issues are going to be much easier to address. And so that's my takeaway as an economist about what I need to think about. And I hope that there's broader things that y'all can take away about what you might learn from econ or the ways that we might need to communicate better with policymakers and politicians. So just in terms of final wrap up, I would again like to thank the Japan Foundation for their support of this, as well as Kansai University. I'd like to thank the Bedrosian Center for hosting this, and Anne and Aubrey in particular for your support in putting this together. So I will give you guys a